Well, it's the end of 2025, and I think it's safe to say that this year did not go as planned. So, the end of the year is a time that a lot of channels will do a review of the trips they've done throughout the year and kind of relive those memories. And that's pretty fun, but I decided I want to do things a little bit differently this year. So, I wanted to review the trips that I did this season and kind of relive some of the things I learned from each of those trips as the year went along. Obviously, the big one being the large trip that didn't work out. And I'm going to touch on that, but I'm not going to focus on it. Instead, I want to focus on the other trips of the year and the lessons that those trips taught me, because I think that is what's more important for this year. So the year started out really strong, and I was really eager to get out and figure and see where I was at in preparation for the big trip coming up, both physically and gear-wise. So the first trip of the season, we went up the Phantom Creek Trail up to Slough Lake. This is the first time I had ever been up there, and it was an absolutely gorgeous spot. I went up this trip with my buddy Ryan and his dog Spirit. Both of them are going to play heavily into this year's trips. As I said, this was an opportunity for me to kind of see where I was at physically for the upcoming big hike. And I went into this trip really confident. I definitely felt really good going up the climbs. I felt really strong, and I felt that my months of physical training had definitely put me in a good position going into the trip. In addition, I was able to also mess around with some new equipment that I had. It was the first time I used my tarp tent, and grow in my confidence in that as well. So what did I learn from this trip? One of the big things I learned from this one was when we got up to the area, there's not a lot of camping up there. And we were really hoping that we would be able to get up there because there's one really good campsite. Unfortunately, that campsite was already taken. It definitely happens. But we were able to find another site, adapt, overcome, and have a really great time. And so I think it was an important precursor to the year of being able to take something that didn't go as planned and make the best out of it. Another thing I think that I learned from this trip was just the importance of these great overnight trips. I had spent so much time focusing on this really big excursion that I didn't really remember to think about those small trips that are the bread and butter of what I do and what I enjoy. And so this one's a really good reminder that sometimes you just have to go for an overnight and enjoy it for what it is. The next trip we went on with Hot Pants. This was going to be our shakedown hike for the big event, which was coming up in the next month. We decided to go up to a place we'd been to several times before, which was Lost Lake, up on the lake fork of the Rock Creek. It's a pretty easy trail. It's pretty easily accessible, but it would be just a really good opportunity for us to kind of see how our legs were feeling and kind of finish up some last minute planning for the big hike. And so we went up to this place, and Lost Lake tends to be a very busy location. A lot of people go up there. So we were really surprised when we got up there and there wasn't anybody else around. And so we had the place all to ourselves, which was actually a really cool experience, albeit unexpected. So we got up there, and again, we were both feeling really strong. We were both feeling really confident going into that big hike. Hindsight being 2020. However, we were feeling pretty good. Our spirits were pretty up. We were definitely getting better at honing our skills with our kits that we had prepared for this big trip. And this gave us an opportunity to really kind of forge that bond before we headed out. But I think the coolest experience of this trip for me personally was an opportunity that I had to really kind of work on my watercolor. Something else that I have been kind of working on as a hobby and really enjoying it. And so we sat by the lake and I started painting. And this was really the first time of that painting that I really had a moment where I was just so locked into the moment and the area around me and what I was visualizing and painting that everything else in my consciousness just melted away. And it was this really cool moment. Connor was fishing and having some really good luck with that. And I just really got into that moment of painting. And so that was really cool. It was a very kind of Zen experience for me, if you will. It was really the first time I'd experienced that. So that was really cool. That was a really cool moment for that trip. And so I think the big lesson for that trip was just allowing yourself to be caught in the moment and not to worry or focus on the things that don't matter at that exact moment in time. And in doing that, I was able to get a different perspective of some land that I had visited multiple times, and it just struck differently. So that was really cool. And that, of course, brings us to the big hike, or the failed big hike. Now, I'm not going to spend too much time on this because I've done other videos on it, and I don't think it needs to be brought up again. However, I think, obviously the lessons learned on this one were going to be pretty important. So I think the biggest lesson for me with a lot of reflection for this particular trip was the importance of listening to your body and the limitations that it's giving you, especially as I get older as a hiker, and being able to listen to those signs and react to them in a way that is going to maintain your safety and help you to make the best decisions for the trip. Obviously, it was a really tough decision to get off of this trail that we had been planning, or this hike that we had been planning for multiple years and had put so much effort into. But at the time, we didn't really know what was going on, and both of us were pretty worried. In hindsight, we realize now that there probably wasn't much to worry about, and I most likely was just suffering a calorie deficiency. But we didn't know that at the time. And so the important thing was we were able to communicate as a team and come up with a game plan that both of us kind of agreed on. My human nature had me feeling very guilty about this. I'm glad to say that since then we've had a talk and realized that there is nothing for either of us to feel guilty about, especially myself, because we both agree that we made the best decision that we could have at that time. But it was really hard. And so I think that really highlighted the importance of being flexible and not staying locked into your plans, and being able to have an effective exit strategy if something goes wrong. And although not fun, this was a really great example that we could in fact do that, which gives us a little bit more confidence going into the next hike, which will be happening in a couple years. We will be doing this again. This is not over yet. Sorry. But after having gone through that, I definitely feel a lot more confident in the future. So I think that although hard lessons learned, they were important lessons for us to learn. Now, this next hike I think was the most important for me personally, because coming out of that hike, I was really down and I didn't want to do anything with backpacking anymore, which is really tough because it's been such a big part of my life, obviously. And so I knew I needed to get past that. And so I reached out to my good buddy Ryan, who I'd gone on the first hike with this particular year. And I said, hey man, I really need to get out and I really need to just shake this. And this is where having a variety of really good hiking friends can be so beneficial. And I'm so grateful to Ryan and Vince for being open to go on this trip. Especially knowing that me as a hiker was in a pretty fragile state, if you will, and not really sure what I was wanting to do with my hiking career at that point. But they didn't hesitate. They jumped in and we ended up going up to Timberline Lake, which again is a place that I have been to several times. In fact, it's where the genesis of this channel was, which I talked about in the video. But we went up there, and interestingly enough, and I think importantly, the trip had its own challenges. The weather did not cooperate. We definitely had some issues, Ryan more than us, with his tent flooding. But it was important, I think, because the lesson there was not only is it important to have good friends to fall back on in rough times to be able to pull you out of the funk and get you on the trail again, but also that even though the weather didn't cooperate, this was still a really fun trip and one of the funnest ones I've been on in a long time. And it was really important, I think, to see that even when things don't go right, it's still a lot of fun, and it's still better than spending a weekend in town. And I'm grateful for that. And also, again, it really highlighted that this year for me, as much as I adore hiking with Connor, he is definitely my go-to hiking partner, but also being able to fall back on other really amazing people that I have had the good fortune of surrounding myself with. Vince and Ryan, I can't thank you enough again. You guys are amazing. I would hike with you any day, and I hope we get to do more in the future. You guys definitely helped get me through this. And that brings me to the last backpacking trip of the season. There's one other trip after that, but it wasn't really backpacking. However, this trip also highlighted another really great friend who, again, continued to help me through this process of evaluating what had happened on that big hike. In this case, my friend Alex, who is a photographer, wanted to go up to Mystic Lake to photograph sunset. And I was a little bit hesitant, to be honest, because Mystic Lake is a place that I've been to a bunch of times and wasn't really excited about going. But, I thought, it'll be an easy trip. And I really like hanging out with Alex, and being that he's a photographer, it'll give me an opportunity to kind of focus more on some of that stuff. I'm really glad we did go, because the lesson I think for this particular trip was the importance of going back to places that are just really great places that I've hiked in the past that I maybe don't consider because I've hiked them so many times, because it really was a gorgeous spot. The weather was perfect, and it was a great experience. And, we had a great hike. We got up there, we set up camp. Again, there wasn't a whole lot of people around, which is odd for this particular spot. And then we hiked up and we had dinner up on the ridge, and we filmed the sunset. I did a time lapse, which turned out really cool. It was just a fun experience. And again, just being able to process everything through with a very trusting and understanding ear, in another really good friend, Alex, who also hope to do more stuff with and kind of explore more things and learn more from him. And so I think the last two trips of this year were really about focusing on just the basics, going to places that are beautiful but comfortable, if that makes sense. And then also just leaning into the amazing people that we have in our lives who are going to really lift us up and help us refine that passion that we had. And I think that's definitely what happened in these last two trips. And those last two trips of this year, I think, were some of the best trips I'd been on in a really long time. And so I'm grateful for that, because I think that is what has allowed me to refocus my attention on this future hike, and what could have been something that just made me just walk away from it completely, which there's nothing wrong with that. But instead, I refocused my attention, and Hot Pants and I replanned and regrouped, and we're ready to do this thing again. This isn't over with. We're going to definitely hit it. And so I think this next year, 2026, going into, is going to be a year of getting ready again, kind of going back into that process. It won't be as heavily beaten into you guys on the channel. I'm going to kind of stay away from that. We've already been down this road. But we are going to get out and do some planning trips and stuff, and just kind of refocus ourselves. But also at the same time, I want to get out and do some more stuff, like these last couple of hikes that really kind of refocused my passion for this hobby. As silly as it sounds, I really think I had to go through this experience. I had to be humbled a little bit to really understand why I do this and why I enjoy it. And I think I found that at the second half of this season in those two really amazing trips. And then, of course, we finished it out with a tradition that we kind of started a couple years ago of doing the hot tent car camping up at East Rosebud, and hiking up to, this time we hiked up to Rimrock Lake to see the new bridge, which is really awesome. And again, just a really fun time with two really amazing guys. And I'm so grateful to be able to share those memories with. And of course, Spirit the dog, because She's awesome. But again, it was just a good opportunity to kind of refocus and reignite those feelings, because I had put so much into that big hike that had become a little bit of all encompassing. And so it was kind of nice to be able to break out of that for a little bit and kind of refocus on why I enjoy backpacking. So for me, I think that's going to be the theme of 2025, learning again why I like backpacking. In 2026, I think we should explore that a little bit more. What do you think? Do you got any big plans for 2026? Share them in the comments below. And thanks again for staying along on this ride. I know this journey this year has been a little bit different, and I'm grateful for those of you that have stayed and continued to interact and be part of the community. Thank you from the bottom of my heart, and let's make next year amazing. As always, keep hiking on.